My name is Eli. Growing up in North Kansas City, you'd think it'd be hard to pick favorites when you only have two sons. But my parents made it look easy. From the time we were kids, Caleb was the center of their world. He was the golden boy, the one who got the biggest piece of chicken, the first slice of cake, and all the praise even when he didn't earn it. Meanwhile, I was just there. The older one. The quiet one. The one they expected to always do the right thing, but never really celebrated when I did. I remember one time in middle school, I spent 2 weeks building a birdhouse for the school science fair. I painted it, made sure the roof opened up, even added a tiny perch for the birds. I came home with second place. All I got was a quick "That's nice, Eli," before Mom turned her attention to Caleb, who had just been suspended for fighting. "He's under so much pressure," she said, hugging him like he was the victim. He smirked behind her back, and I just stood there, holding my ribbon like it didn't matter. Caleb could wreck the car at 16, and they'd blame the weather. I came home 5 minutes late from work, and suddenly I was irresponsible. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" Mom would say, without a hint of irony. My dad, Thomas, wasn't much better. He'd take Caleb fishing, one-on-one, even though I was the one who actually helped him in the garage every weekend. I asked him once why I never got invited. He didn't even look up from the engine he was working on. "Caleb needs more guidance," he said. "It wasn't just in how they treated us, it was in what they expected." I was expected to be steady, responsible, invisible. Caleb was allowed to fail, fall apart, screw up, and somehow he was still the hero. I was the safety net, always there to catch the mess he left behind. By high school, I'd learned to keep my achievements to myself. I got a part-time job at a local auto shop, saved up for my own tools, and even helped pay the water bill once when Dad was laid off. No one asked how. No one even noticed. But when Caleb scored a B- in math after failing for half the semester, they threw him a little dinner celebration like he graduated with honors. It's strange, the way a house can feel so full but leave you feeling so empty. I wasn't unloved, I don't think. But I was certainly unseen, and that was the beginning of everything. The small cracks, the quiet resentment, the part of me that learned to survive without recognition. Because when your parents make it clear who they've chosen, you don't fight for the spotlight, you learn to live in the shadows. But shadows remember everything, and one day they step into the light. By the time we reached adulthood, the roles had already been cast, and I played mine like I was born into it. I stayed behind in North Kansas City, working full-time at Dad's garage. When his arthritis got worse, I picked up the slack, ordering parts, dealing with customers, even managing the books. I didn't complain. I figured it was my duty as the oldest, and maybe, just maybe, if I stuck around long enough, they'd finally see me. Caleb, on the other hand, chased bigger dreams. He moved to St. Louis, got into real estate, and started posting photos online in tailored suits. Shaking hands with big names, driving luxury cars he probably didn't even own. Every now and then, he'd show up for holidays with expensive gifts and a fake smile, and my parents lit up like he'd parted the Red Sea. The worst part? He barely called. Weeks, sometimes months, would go by with nothing but silence. But the moment he did pick up the phone, my mother's voice would ring through the house like bells on a Sunday morning. "Caleb called today," she'd say, eyes sparkling. "He just closed on a big deal." I'd be in the next room washing dishes or fixing the sink. My hands were always busy, because someone had to take care of things. Groceries didn't buy themselves. Dad's pills didn't refill on their own. And when the roof started leaking, it wasn't Caleb who climbed up with a hammer. It was me. When Dad's knees finally gave out, I drove him to physical therapy twice a week. I cooked for them when Mom was too tired. I paid bills when they fell behind, and never asked for anything back. But no matter what I did, I was never the one they talked about at church. Never the one Mom boasted about to her friends. She'd say, "Eli's around," like I was a coat rack. Meanwhile, Caleb, who hadn't been home in months, was still the star of every story. One time, I overheard her on the phone with a cousin, saying, "Caleb's always been such a go-getter. He's doing so well out there." She didn't even mention me. I was in the same house, peeling potatoes in the kitchen. You'd think that would have made me angry. But it didn't, not then. At the time, it just hurt. Deep, quiet hurt. The kind you bury under layers of responsibility and routine. I didn't want parades or applause. Just recognition. A simple thank you would have gone a long way. But it never came. Instead, I became the silent glue that held everything together, while they sang praises to someone who barely showed up. In their eyes, Caleb was the success story, and I was just the supporting act, always present, rarely acknowledged, utterly invisible. But what they didn't realize was, even shadows can grow teeth, and I was learning how to bite. When Dad's health started slipping, it didn't happen all at once. It crept in slowly, like winter through a cracked window. First it was fatigue, then pain in his bones. The diagnosis came on a cold morning, stage 4 cancer. By the time they found it, it had already spread. I was the one who took him to the oncologist. I sat through the long silences in the car ride home, pretending I didn't notice the tears he wiped away with trembling fingers. I learned the names of medications I couldn't pronounce, managed appointments, kept track of when he needed blood work, and helped him out of bed when his legs didn't want to work anymore. Mom tried. She really did. But I could see the fear in her eyes. She leaned on me more and more, not just for physical help, but emotional strength. I was the one who stayed up with her after Dad's treatments left him too weak to speak. I was the one who handled the insurance calls and drove to the pharmacy at 10 p.m. when he needed something right away. And Caleb? He came down once. One visit. 20 minutes. He strolled in wearing a button-down shirt, like he was coming back from a networking event. He kissed Mom on the cheek, stood awkwardly at Dad's bedside, then said, "I'll call you guys soon." That was it. No questions. No offers to help. Just another disappearing act. Still, when he left, Mom looked proud. "At least he came," she whispered like it was a favor. The final weeks were brutal. Dad was in constant pain. Some days, he didn't recognize me. I stayed by his side anyway, sometimes sleeping in a chair next to his bed. When he finally slipped away, it was quiet, peaceful. I was there. Holding his hand, I called Caleb. He answered on the second ring. "That's tough, man," he said. "I'll head down for the funeral." He arrived the night before. Didn't even ask how Mom was holding up. Didn't ask what needed to be done. He showed up at the church in a sharp black suit, shook hands with everyone like a politician, and made sure to stand front and center in the family photo after the service. People offered their condolences and said things like, "Your boys must have made you proud." Mom smiled and nodded. But deep down, I knew which one she believed had made her proud. After the funeral, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Mom sat on the couch, staring at a picture of Dad. I cleaned up the dishes, took out the trash, and booked her an appointment with a grief counselor the next day. I was holding the family together by threads. But still, no one seemed to notice. The truth is, I didn't get to grieve, because I was too busy being strong. For her, for the house, for the memory of a man I just lost, and for the brother who only showed up when cameras were flashing. A week after the funeral, when the flowers had wilted and the last casserole dish had been returned, Mom called me and Caleb into the living room. She held a small manila folder in her lap, the kind that looked too thin to carry anything important, yet heavy enough to change the course of a life. Her hands trembled as she opened it, but her voice was calm. Practiced. Your father and I updated the will a few months before he passed, she began, her eyes flicking nervously between us. I sat quietly on the couch, still raw with grief. Caleb, as usual, looked untouched by it all, leaning back in his chair, scrolling through his phone until she cleared her throat. We thought long and hard about this, she said, and we tried to do what's fair. That word made my stomach tighten. Even before she read anything, I had a feeling this wouldn't go the way it should. She cleared her throat again and started reading. The house will go to Caleb, since he's more likely to use it or sell it for something bigger. The savings account, what's left in it, will also go to Caleb to help with his business. Eli. She paused, as if searching for the right words. You'll keep the garage. I just stared at her. The garage? The place I had been running for years without asking for a dime in return. The business I kept alive while Dad faded away. I didn't inherit it, I earned it. And now they were handing Caleb everything else, like he was the one who had been here through it all. She looked at me, almost expecting a nod of approval. It's fair, right? That word again. Fair. It echoed in my head like an insult, like a punch wrapped in politeness. I couldn't even speak. Not because I didn't have words, but because none of them would have mattered to her. Caleb offered some half-hearted comment about maybe splitting some of the savings later, but I knew better. He wasn't going to give up a cent. He never did. I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because I needed to leave before the anger boiled over. When I stepped outside into the cold Missouri evening, the wind hit me like a wall. I stood in the driveway of a house I'd helped maintain, fixed, protected, and realized I'd never really belonged there. I was the spare tire, the backup plan, the afterthought. That moment broke something in me, not just because they gave him everything, but because it proved something I had feared my whole life. No matter what I did, I would never be enough, not for them, not in their eyes, and that's when I stopped trying to be seen. That's when something darker began to take shape, not out of hatred, but out of pain, a pain that would soon become purpose. That night, after the will was read, I sat in the dark at my apartment. No lights, no TV, no sound. Just me and the heaviness pressing against my chest. I'd held it together all week, buried everything under the weight of duty and grief. But now, in the silence, it all came crashing in. The betrayal wasn't just fresh, it was surgical, clean, intentional. My mother didn't hesitate. Caleb didn't protest. And I was expected to nod, smile, and disappear into the same shadow I'd been living in since childhood. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But something in me cracked. I thought about everything I had done. Every sacrifice. Every sleepless night driving Dad to chemo. Every bill I covered. Every meal I cooked. Every repair I made around the house they just handed to someone who had barely lifted a finger. Was my loyalty invisible? Was my love worthless? I didn't want revenge, not in the dramatic TV movie kind of way. I didn't want to set fire to anything or cause a scene. No. I wanted something colder, cleaner. I wanted to reclaim my dignity, not through violence or chaos, but through control. So I sat there, eyes locked on the ceiling, and a plan began to take shape. Slowly. Methodically. It started with a simple truth. I knew Caleb. I knew how he worked, how he thought. Everything was image with him. Flashy suits, rented cars, social media clout. His whole world was built like a house of cards, propped up by appearances and debt. And I knew where the cracks were. He thought I was just the garage guy. The boring, quiet brother. The one who would keep fixing things while he made millions. He didn't know I'd been learning, watching, preparing. The first step was selling the garage. Yeah, the same garage they gave me like it was a consolation prize. I had no intention of clinging to it while they handed Caleb the future. I found a buyer within 2 weeks. The money wasn't massive, but it was enough to start something else. I began researching LLCs, investment accounts, shell companies. I contacted a lawyer, not the flashy kind, but the kind who doesn't ask too many questions. I used aliases. I talked to property managers, cash buyers, even shady developers. I started buying into Caleb's world, not loudly, quietly, silently. I wasn't going to knock on the front door of his empire. I was going to slip in through the basement, take the foundation, brick by brick, until the whole thing collapsed, and he'd have no idea it was me until it was too late. This wasn't about money. This was about being seen. This was about finally taking up space in a family that had always pushed me to the side. They thought I was done, but I was just getting started. I moved in silence. No announcements. No confrontations. Just methodical, deliberate steps toward a goal only I knew existed. While Caleb posted photos of champagne toasts and sunset rooftop deals, I was building something underneath it all. Something sharp, something invisible. I took the money from the shop sale and split it into separate LLCs, each with its own name, identity, and paper trail. I worked with a contact, an old accountant from Dad's mechanic circle, who knew how to keep things discreet. He helped me bury my fingerprints so deep, even Caleb's lawyer wouldn't sniff me out. I targeted 3 properties. Not the flashy high-rises he bragged about, but the foundation, the small, gritty apartment complexes he'd acquired early in his career. They weren't glamorous, but they were important. Quiet cash cows. The kind of buildings that paid the bills while he played the part of a real estate mogul. I made my move during a lull in the market, when owners were desperate to unload and Caleb was distracted by a development project across town. Through Proxys, I snatched up the contracts. Became a minority investor. Just enough to get in, just enough to cause problems. Then I let the rot begin. I didn't scream sabotage. I let the buildings fall. Quietly. I accidentally approved bad tenants. I let repairs lapse. I delayed maintenance crews, filed nuisance complaints with the city, and withheld payments to contractors. All of it subtle, just enough to keep things legally gray but operationally toxic. Tenants started leaving. Code violations piled up. Lawsuits trickled in. Caleb's name was on the paperwork, so the blows landed squarely on his chest. He didn't see it coming. To him, it was just bad luck. A rough patch. Maybe poor management. I watched from a distance as he scrambled, throwing money at the problem, burning bridges with partners, making desperate calls to city officials. His posts grew less frequent. His smile thinner. All the while, I stayed hidden. Never involved. Never suspected. It was strangely empowering, watching someone so smug, so privileged, flail against the very system he once used to float above us. The empire he built on charm and shortcuts was starting to sway in the wind, and no one knew why. But I knew. I wasn't trying to destroy Caleb for sport. I wasn't even doing it out of hatred. I was doing it for every time I was told to be grateful for less. For every dinner where my achievements were ignored, and his excuses were forgiven. For every "that's fair" that wasn't. This was my answer. Not loud, not violent, just surgical. One move at a time. I was becoming the ghost in his machine, and the best part, he had no idea I was there. It started small. An email from a tenant complaining about mold in one of Caleb's buildings. A minor issue, the kind that could have been fixed in a day. But it wasn't, because I made sure the maintenance crew never showed up. Then came the noise complaints. One after another. Tenants throwing parties at all hours, a pit bull in a no-pets unit, someone reportedly selling drugs out of the basement laundry room. All of it? Approved through the property manager I planted. Caleb thought it was just bad luck. The market's changing, he told a local business podcast. Temporary setbacks. He brushed off the complaints. Told his investors it was just a seasonal dip. But I knew better. I had built the storm around him, slow, quiet, and choking. And the cracks were starting to show. The city came next. Zoning violations. Missed inspection appointments. Unpaid fines that were somehow overlooked. A few well-placed calls and anonymous tips ensured city inspectors visited his buildings like clockwork. They found everything I wanted them to: faulty wiring, expired permits, overcrowded units. Nothing that would destroy him overnight, but enough to keep him in a constant state of panic. By the time the third notice of violation hit his inbox, investors began pulling out. Caleb's carefully curated image of control and confidence started to unravel. No more flashy posts. No more rooftop selfies. His social media went dark for a while. Then came a vague quote graphic about real friends and fake loyalty. I almost laughed. Behind the scenes, I kept tightening the screws. One investor threatened to sue. A developer backed out of a joint project. His name, once associated with trendy condos and smooth deals, was now floating around legal forums and real estate message boards for all the wrong reasons. I passed him once on the street downtown. He didn't see me. His eyes were glued to his phone, jaw clenched, walking fast like he was being chased by his own crumbling life. And in a way, he was. His world, built on charm, shortcuts, and inherited confidence, was shrinking. Day by day, dollar by dollar. Still, he didn't suspect me. To him, I was still Eli, the quiet one, the garage guy, the brother with dirt under his nails, and not much else. He had no idea I had sold the shop. No idea I had ghosted my way into his business. No idea the man behind his downfall was the same one who used to hand him tools in Dad's garage without asking for thanks. I didn't feel guilty. Not once. Because this wasn't revenge. It was correction. A long overdue rebalancing of what life, and our family, had made unfair from the beginning. Caleb still thought he was untouchable. But what he didn't know was that the foundation had already cracked, and I was the one swinging the hammer, slowly, silently, with a smile. He showed up on my doorstep on a gray Sunday morning. No warning. No text. Just 3 soft knocks on the door. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. When I opened it, Caleb stood there, not in his usual suit or designer jacket, but in a wrinkled hoodie and jeans that looked slept in. His eyes were hollow. His posture defeated. The man who once strutted through life like it owed him something now looked like he was waiting for it to take the last piece of him. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice low. I stepped aside without saying a word. He sat on the edge of my worn-out couch like it might reject him. I didn't offer coffee. Didn't ask how he'd been. I let the silence stretch until he finally cracked. I lost everything. "Eli," he said. "The condos. Gone. Investors pulled out. I'm drowning in legal fees. I even sold the house, Mom and Dad's house. I didn't want to, but there was no other way." He rubbed his hands over his face, like he could wipe away the truth. I stayed standing, watching, waiting. "I need help," he said, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I don't have anyone else." I wanted to feel sorry for him. I really did. But all I could think about was the day Mom called the will fair. I remembered how he smiled, how he didn't even offer to share. I remembered every sacrifice I made, every late-night run for Dad's medication, every roof repair, every time I was ignored, invisible, dismissed, and now he wanted help. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "You already got the help, Caleb. You got everything." He blinked. "What do you mean?" "You got the house, the money, the praise, the spotlight. All those years. I got to work the garage and be forgotten. You? You were the success story." He shifted uncomfortably, trying to speak, but I raised my hand. I spent my life being quiet, letting things go, carrying weight I didn't ask for. And now? Now I finally have peace. And I won't give it up, not even for you. He sat there, stunned. For the first time, Caleb had no words. "You want to know what fair feels like?" I asked. "It's this moment. You asking me for something, and getting nothing." He nodded slowly, his pride swallowed whole. And then he got up and left. No hugs, no promises to change. Just silence, the kind I had lived in for years. Only this time, I wasn't the one walking away empty-handed. This time, the silence was mine. And for the first time in my life, it felt like justice. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to what others gave me or didn't give me. I wasn't waiting for praise that never came or chasing love that was handed out like a prize to the one who performed best. I had stepped out of the role I was born into, the invisible son, and written a new one, and this time I was the author. What I did to Caleb wasn't about revenge in the loud, dramatic sense. I didn't ruin him to gloat. I didn't sabotage his life to become the villain in some twisted family drama. I did it because I needed something deeper, something quieter, more lasting. Justice, the kind that doesn't scream, but echoes. The kind that lives not in shouts, but in silence. The same silence I'd been handed for decades. I didn't rejoice when Caleb fell. There was no celebration when he left my apartment that day with his head down, empty-handed. But there was peace, a stillness inside me, a deep breath I hadn't been able to take in years. He lost everything he was handed, because he never knew what it meant to earn anything. I took back everything I was denied, not by stealing, but by building in the shadows until I stood in the light. I never told Mom. I never gloated, never said, "This is what your favorite son became." She still called every now and then, asking if I'd heard from Caleb, wondering why he didn't visit much anymore. I just told her he was busy. Truth is, I didn't need her validation anymore. I'd stopped chasing it the day she said that's fair. I forgave her in my own way, not because she deserved it, but because I refused to let her blind spots define me. I couldn't go back and rewrite our childhood, but I could choose how the rest of my story played out. And I chose peace. Some people say the past should stay buried. But I think the past should be understood, not forgotten. Because the moment I understood mine, why I was overlooked, why Caleb was praised, why I felt so small for so long, I stopped being angry, and I started becoming whole. I'm not rich. I'm not famous. But I own who I am now. I make smart investments. I live simply. I sleep well. And for the first time, I look in the mirror and see someone who matters, not to a parent or a brother, but to myself. That, to me, is the sweetest justice of all. So no, I didn't burn Caleb's life to the ground. I just let the weight of his own entitlement do the job for me, and I watched it fall from a distance, with peace in my heart and a smile he never saw